Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. We are at the start of free agency for the 2027 to 2028 offseason. We've got some money to spend, and we're going to give ourselves a little bit more money to play around with right now by cutting our scouting and player development budgets down a bit. Our hope is that we'll be able to pump those back up a little bit when all is said and done. But we want to give ourselves as much payroll flexibility as possible as we head into this off season, where we need to add a big bat to help our brutal offense. If we can add someone with a big bat who also happens to have a pretty good glove, that would be positive also, because we need to help our pretty brutal defense. And our pitching was just mediocre last year, but we are in a situation where, with some decisions we made with non-tendering arbitration eligible players and trading away several other arbitration eligible pitchers, we could theoretically use a fourth or fifth starter. We've got guys who could fill that role if we don't make a move, but if there's a decent starter available, something for us to consider. And we still might like to add another left-handed arm to our bullpen. And on that topic, we've made an offer already to the lefty Adrian Morjan. And we've also made an offer to the international free agent Lang Choi. Appreciate all of the comments and advice on what we should consider doing in this episode. We are going to take some advice. At the end of last episode, we looked at Takao Ota, a 25-year-old coming over from Japan. We only have average scouting accuracy on him, but it's going to take 3 weeks to get a full scouting report. It does look like someone who could potentially have an interesting bat. He's a DH / first baseman. Can't play him in the outfield even. So limited flexibility. If he's what he is today, he's not all that useful a player. If he continues to develop a bit, or if he's better than we think he is, though, could be an interesting bat. So we're going to go ahead and offer him something right now, because right now he's only looking for a minor league contract that becomes guaranteed if promoted. So we can bring him into our system essentially risklessly. And if we don't think he's a $1.8 million player, not that we're going to offer him 1.8, we're going to cut it back a little bit to see if he'll accept 1.5. If we don't think he's a $1.5 million player at the end of March, or we just don't have a spot on the major league team for him, we can keep him in the minors another 30 days and have that flexibility. So looks like he's willing to consider a minor league deal with a major league option of $1.5 million next year. So we'll submit that offer to him. If he comes back and says he wants more or different or a multi-year major league deal because there's other teams that get involved more aggressively in the bidding, hopefully at least at that point we will have a updated scouting report on him. And one other thing I've done is I have been scouting things out offline over the last couple of days in real time, is thinking a little more seriously about potentially bringing on Dylan Carlson or Ronald Acuna Jr. just because of the amount of money that we have available. And neither is a perfect bat at this point. Acuna Jr. has more speed, and over the course of his career, especially with the season he's coming off last year, has been a more productive hitter. Carlson, however, is a little bit better defensively and has been consistently an above-average major league hitter. Also like the fact that he's a switch hitter, and he's listed as a center fielder. I think we would prefer someone a little better defensively in center field, but at least he can play the position in a pinch, although defensively, with the way Miguel played for us last year after we picked him up as a Rule 5 guy, And actually, the way he hit offensively with a 2020 homer and stolen base season, he's kind of got that position locked down unless a superstar was available. But back to Carlson. We look at his 60 contact, his 55 home run power, and his 65 I. Obviously above average in all of those categories, but it doesn't sound particularly impressive. But when we compare him to how many players in the league have those traits, he definitely stands out a little bit. There's only 6 players in all of baseball that have 60 plus contact, 55 plus power, and a 65 plus I. And that's not to say that Carlson is one of the 6 best hitters in baseball, because clearly he's not. There could be a guy with 55 contact who's got 80 power and 80 I who's not going to show up in this search. So I'm not trying to say that Carlson and Acuna Jr., who also happens to fit the same criteria and are free agents, are necessarily among the 10 best hitters in baseball. But they both still do bring a unique skill set. You can see the other 4 guys: Vlad Guerrero Jr., Yordan Alvarez, Shinichi Fujioka, and Kenny Lavari, who's the most interesting one. Guy's 25 years old, making the major league minimum, coming off of a monster year, 40 homers, 124 ribbies, led the AL in walks, on-base percentage, OPS, WRC plus, and WAR. And this was a guy who was an 18th round pick just 3 years ago out of Old Dominion. The progress he has made is incredible. You can see when we had very high scouting accuracy on him even a year before he was drafted, didn't seem all that impressive. And then right before he was drafted, we didn't think he was ever going to amount to anything. But clearly our scout has changed his tune on him dramatically, and I think others have changed their tune on him dramatically. Clearly probably one of the best values in Major League history already for an 18th round draft pick, even though he's only 25 years old at this point. He's already won a Silver Slugger this past season. So we tried to see what it would take to trade for him, and the price, not surprisingly, was crippling. So if we are to add a big bat, I think we're likely to go through the free agent route. That said, I do have a couple of trade offers that I've put together that are outstanding. I'm going to wait till hopefully move forward to tomorrow and hear the responses to those and talk through them with all of you. I don't think they're necessarily going to be accepted, but I don't want to make an offer to Acuna Jr. or Carlson yet, because if those trades do both go through, we'd be taking on a decent amount of salary and really kind of changing the way our roster looks. So let's sim ahead and see if we get any responses. And we have gotten responses to both of the trade offers we made. And the first one was bringing on catcher Sean Murphy from the Braves. Obviously, a excellent defensive catcher. The bat is mixed. The reason they're willing to trade him is that he's making $15 million this coming year, and then he's got a team option next year at $15 million. So pretty expensive for what he is at this point. The guy who's coming off a season when he hit a buck 189, and he hasn't had higher than a 1.6 WAR each of the last 2 seasons. So it doesn't bring a ton to the table offensively at this point, but still a very good defensive catcher. And if we're willing to take on his salary, we can get him for cheap. We just have to give up our backup catcher, Israel Pineda, who had a brutal offensive season for us this year after a really good offensive season the year before, but doesn't bring much to the table defensively. And then we have to add in one more middling prospect or a big-time player, and obviously we'll be more likely to throw in a middling prospect to get the deal done. But you're probably asking me, hey, old school, You just made that trade a few months ago for Jonah Heim that some of us absolutely hated to give yourself an excellent starting defensive catcher. Why do you need to bring Sean Murphy on board? And it's a great question because Heim, with his two previous teams combining to keep 75% of his contract, is only making a little over $4 million this coming season. So he is actually an asset that is in demand. And we have the ability to make a trade that could really help us with the Boston Red Sox if we include Jonah Heim as a cornerstone part of it. And we also have to include Edgar Ojeda, who's the number 89 prospect in baseball. And then we're still going to have to add in one more useful to excellent player to get it done. But we'd get the 24-year-old shortstop Marcelo Meyer in return, who is a more than competent defensive shortstop, not a Gold Glove winner, but a guy that we'd be comfortable putting out there every day at short. And short is becoming a bit of a need for us because Kevin Made is now fragile physically, and his bat this past year regressed. Marcelo, I don't see him being a Silver Slugger winner at shortstop, but you look at the first 3 seasons that he's had here in the major leagues, actually the last 3 seasons that we can see here, and he's put up 131, 125, and 105 OPS pluses with a 4.2, 5.2, and 3.9 WAR. So my thought is that Meyer is the guy who stabilizes our defense at short by at least having normal injury proneness and being out there every day, gives us a better bat at shortstop, and allows us to potentially move Mr. Made into more of a utility infielder role. So I'm pretty excited about the prospect to potentially bring on Marcelo Meyer. The issue, though, with these deals is that Meyer is also making $15.2 million this year in arbitration, going to be making $20 million likely next year. So if I bring both Meyer and Murphy on board, that's basically using all the money that we've got available. And it definitely means that we don't have the opportunity to go for either Carlson or Ronald Acuna Jr. Now, with the money that we've opened up, could we try to do all 3 if we get creative and are willing to invest somewhat less in scouting and player development next year? Yeah, there's that chance, which is why I just opened up the money in those budgets. But my hope is to maybe be able to structure something where we add in another player or 2 and we can get Atlanta and or Boston to retain a chunk of those contracts that we'd be taking on board to give ourselves even more flexibility. I don't feel great about moving on from Jonah Heim because his catcher ability is even a little higher than Murphy's, although his arm is not quite as good. And he was a really good hitter when we brought him over. 291 average, 11 doubles and 7 homers in 175 at-bats. Put up a WAR of over 2 in just 50 games for our Buffalo Wings last year. And we were also playing our best baseball over the last couple of months of the season when Heim was a member of our team. So I don't love moving on from him, but we really only have him for this year anyways. And if it lets me bring on a 24-year-old shortstop in Marcelo Meyer, who has an above-average bat with a pretty good glove, I think that just makes our infield a lot more solid, both offensively and defensively, because then Bichette is our second baseman for this upcoming season, but he's also fragile. Deshaun Seifu moves to third, where I think he's more of a natural player potentially than even at second. and it lets the likes of Tommy Troy as well as Kevin Made move into backup roles. And you figure with Bichette being fragile and Made being fragile, one or both of them is going to end up on the IL. Jordan Westberg likely get pushed out of his starting third baseman role to make room for Seifu in this scenario, but he'll still be with us on the bench. Nolan Jones is the tough one in that situation because right now he's our only captain personality, so we want to keep him around. But he's actually kind of angry at this point with the team record and the performance, so we've got to get better to kind of keep him happy. But I do think that Marcelo Meyer is a type of asset that I don't think we've got coming up in our system. And given the improvements we made to our starting pitching staff last year, I think really stabilizing the infield defense, giving us a lot more depth and optionality and solid infield defensive players, and also kind of improving our bat helps. So I think I'm going to go back to both Atlanta and Boston, put in, who I view as the least attractive option they're looking for, who gets the deal done, but also ask them to try to keep a chunk of both of those contracts and see if maybe we can get something done at a reasonable enough price for both Murphy and Meyer that we can still potentially chase after Dylan Carlson also. And it seems like Atlanta's willing to deal because they want to get that contract off their books. So we actually added in two of the players that they were interested in, Vicente Morones and Shep Hancock. Asked them to retain 30% of the contract, and they said, NFW, you need to throw in a big-time player or a big-time prospect to get that done. So that is not going to work. We're going to go back to them and see if maybe we can get them to retain just a little bit of Murphy's contract to make things slightly more palatable for us financially. All right, we've got offers back out to Atlanta and Boston now, getting them to potentially keep a relatively small amount of Meyer and Murphy's contracts next year. Let's move forward today and see what they have to say. We did have to add in some interesting players to get them to think about making these deals. I don't know, with the fact that we added in a player they wanted, but also asked them to take on money, how far we are away from getting something done. But that's the fun of the game. We'll find out shortly. And the word must be getting around that we are willing to trade away the top 100 prospect Edgar Ojeda, because the Rockies just offered us 26-year-old second baseman Ezequiel Tovar for him. He's making almost $19 million this coming year. Has been a good offensive player, and he's certainly decent defensively. Has some pretty interesting speed and stealing and base running skills, although his speed is not exceptional. I like Meyer better, but it's nice to know that that's a potential option. The issue is neither Atlanta nor Boston really willing to retain much of the contract. Murphy, we had 15%. We added Shep Hancock into the deal. But to get them to retain that 15%, we've got to give a pretty good player or a pretty decent prospect. Boston, we had them retaining 30% of Meyer's contract. We had to add in 2026 Rookie of the Year Lloydell Chappelli, who's, I don't think, a big part of our future at this point, unfortunately. But even adding him in, they won't retain 30% unless we give them the excellent young first baseman / outfielder Vance Honeycutt, which we're not going to give the number 47 prospect up just to get them to take some money. So we're going to come back to them, try to get them to retain a little bit of money in both of these deals. And then if we're able to bring both of these guys on board, obviously Murphy is likely another rental for us. Not all that different than Heim, except we're spending a lot more money on him than we'd be spending on Heim next year. But the fact that we're able to leverage Heim into a middle infielder that hopefully we can build around for the future makes it worthwhile in my mind. Obviously, that $20 million arbitration number next year for Meyer is pretty intimidating, but he's also a pretty darn good player and a pretty young player. And he helps us in terms of improving our infield defense and also improving our offense. So I think we're going to keep trying to spin these two trades together. And I think we're getting close, but we want to make sure we do both deals because we don't want to bring Murphy on board and then not be able to ship Heim off to bring on Marcelo Meyer. So we're closer to the Sean Murphy deal. We're only going to get them to retain 10% of his contract. We had to add in another prospect, Vicente Morones, just to get them to do that. And now we're at the point where we can add in either a middling prospect or a veteran minor leaguer with a good personality. And we're going to throw in the second baseman, Logan Chambers, 27-year-old. We had him in high A ball this past year. Clearly not a big part of our future. Guy that we did pick in the 18th round in our first draft out of Tennessee. Picked him then for the good personality late in the draft. He's kind of served his purpose in the organization. So we are going to go ahead and add Logan Chambers to the deal. And we're going to just go ahead and complete the trade because I think we're going to get something done with Boston. It may be a little more painful than we like, but we're going to bring Sean Murphy on board, get rid of our backup catcher, Israel Pineda, who was likely not going to be our backup this coming year anyways. We really want to use Samuel Basallo, who is a potentially really interesting bat. Not that great a defensive catcher, but honestly in the same range as Pineda defensively as a catcher. And you can see we've also been training him at first base, but a better bat than Pineda. So Pineda was not going to be on the major league team most likely anyways. And then Shep Hancock and Vicente Morones are decent-ish prospects. Logan Chambers, as we talked about, not a big-time prospect. We're basically getting Murphy for not all that great a package because we're taking on a $13.5 million of a $15 million contract that quite honestly isn't all that attractive, but we get ourselves a good defensive catcher to hopefully replace Heim. And we do have the team option next year at $15 million. Hard to imagine we'll exercise that. Think it probably will make sense to let him hit free agency, even if we want to bring him back and hopefully sign him for less. But obviously, if he has a monster year for us and our pitching staff ends up great, that would be awesome. But we're going to go ahead and complete this trade, bring Sean Murphy on board. Fans pleased with that. Now we just need to make sure we get a deal done with Boston. And unfortunately, adding in Chappelli and the third base prospect Cameron Cawley, who we picked up in a trade with the Angels last summer, hit .285 with 7 homers and 158 bats for us in AAA. Has some decent speed, can play a lot of different positions, but I don't think the bat is really going to be good enough for the majors. But even adding in both of them, if Boston's going to retain 20% of the contract, they want Honeycutt, our new closer Devin Williams, or Nick York, the pretty good hitting first baseman / corner outfielder. So I think we're going to go back to them and just see if they'll retain less of Meyer's contract with this 4-person crew that we're sending them. Can we get them to retain $1.5 million of Meyer's contract too? So we'll submit that offer to them and find out what the Red Sox are thinking here. But we've hopefully got our new catcher. Issue is we just need to get rid of our old catcher in this deal for Meyer. And then if we get that done, then we can potentially look to add one of those big bats. Going to have just about enough money, and then the question will just be, can we get either Carlson or Acuna Jr. to maybe sign for fewer years and a little bit less money than they're looking for right now. And I think we are going to get our shortstop. It's going to be costly, but you're getting a 24-year-old shortstop who can field and hit. It needs to be costly. They're still looking for some big-time names, even keeping 10% of his contract, but one that I'm willing to put in is 34-year-old Joo-Chol Kim. He is a guy who was a minor league free agent signing of ours before this last season. Out of South Korea, the 34-year-old spent the whole year in Albany, where he was 10-14 with a 5.81 ERA. Obviously not a huge part of our future. Could be that fourth or fifth starter that we were talking about that we need. But given the way he performed in Albany, the fact that he's 34 years old, the fact that the movement on his pitches is not great, and he gave up 45 homers in 182 and 2/3 innings in Albany, I don't think he is the answer that we're looking for. So it's not a costless trade. We're giving up the number 89 prospect in baseball, Edgar Ojeda. You may remember he slipped to the 6th round in 2026 simply because he was looking for an insane amount of money. And fortunately for us, we hit an insane amount of money to throw at him. Still looks like he could be a very good hitter. Don't love his personality. And he has hit just 220 and 211 in his first 2 years in rookie ball, so he's by no means a sure thing. But he's obviously the cornerstone of the deal, along with Jonah Heim, an excellent defensive catcher who's got a pretty decent bat. And as I said, with the fact that Pittsburgh's got 50% of his salary and the Rangers have 25%, he's only costing a little over $4 million for the Red Sox next season, so that's why he's a very valuable asset. Lloyd L. Chappelli, we talked about, he was Rookie of the Year for us in 2026. Last year, he did not hit at the major league level. We ended up shipping him down to AAA, where he did have some pretty good home run power. But he's kind of the odd man out in our outfield right now. Cameron Cawley, we already talked about, not a big-time prospect. And then adding in Joo-Chol Kim, more than willing to do that to get a 24-year-old shortstop, making big money, and they're only going to keep 10% of it. But really like the glove, really like the bat. He, over the course of his major league career, over the course of parts of 5 seasons now, has put up a 115 OPS plus, 117 WRC plus, and an average of a 5 WAR for every 162 games that he's played. So I think we want to add higher end talent to this team. And I think Meyer is certainly higher end talent than anyone in the trade right now. And the only one, who could become a better offensive player is clearly Ojeda. And that's if he completely develops. And as I said, he's had 2 years in the minors at this point where he hasn't really done all that much. Doesn't mean that he's not going to develop, but the fact that we can bring on a young guy who's under our control for another 2 seasons, and then we'll get the first crack over the next couple years of trying to get Meyer signed to an extension, I think it makes sense. So we are going to add Joo-Chol Kim into the deal. And although our assistant GM, Michael Hill, says he's not sold on it, we are going to welcome Marcelo Meyer to Buffalo. And the fans not happy that we let Heim go, but the fans are happy that Meyer's on board. Take a look at the front office, and we're still flat where we were at 99 in terms of fan interest. So a couple of pretty big moves to start off the offseason, bringing in a big-time defensive catcher with Sean Murphy and bringing in a guy who is going to become our starting shortstop, hopefully for not just the next 2 years, but hopefully long into the future with Marcelo Meyer. And hopefully those two moves will go a long way towards shoring up the defense and improving the offense of this Buffalo Wings team for next season. So with Murphy and Meyer on board, now we can potentially pivot to bringing on a big-time bat through free agency. Still haven't heard anything from the left-handed pitcher Morjan, and then Choi and Oda, who we made minor league offers to. But the top two guys, other than Oda potentially, at least in terms of potential, are Carlson and Acuna Jr. Acuna Jr., clearly over the course of his career with a 125 OPS plus, 125 WRC plus, is the more dynamic offensive player. And he's also a guy with great speed with 53, 49, and 58 steals the last couple years. Not as good defensively, basically only plays in right field. But certainly a guy who could help our offense, looking for 6 years at an average of $25.6 million to top the alleged offer that he has from Texas. Turning to Carlson, over the course of his career, 106 OPS plus, 107 WRC plus, so certainly not as big time an offensive player. But he does have significantly better range and error ratings. His arm's not quite as good. And when we talk contract with him, he says he's got an offer from LA and he's looking for 4 years at about $24.6 million. I do like the fact that he's a switch hitter. He is a guy who can steal a few bases, not nearly the same level as Acuna Jr. I like his defensive versatility. I like that Carlson is a switch hitter. And I also like that Carlson is potentially only a 4-year commitment instead of a 5-year commitment. And I really like that Carlson can play center field. Even if he's not an optimal solution out there, he does give us a little more versatility. But obviously we're not going to be able to bring both on board. So the question is, if we go in one direction, which direction makes sense? And there is an option to obviously go cheaper than we've been looking. Alex Verdugo is a guy who was mentioned in the comments for previous episode. Clearly not the same kind of bat. He's also a couple years older. Now he's a lot cheaper. And he is coming off a year when he led the AL with 50 doubles. But I don't know that he's going to hit like that again. Also not the best personality for the clubhouse. He's looking for 3 years right now. Now, admittedly, it's half the price or less than half the price of the other guys, but I think I'm willing to go a little higher end than Verdugo at this point. Just a matter of which higher end hitter to go with. And I think I'm going to end up making the offer to Carlson over Acuna Jr. It was a closer call than I had thought. I thought it was going to be Carlson, and I'm really teetering back and forth. Acuna Jr.'s hit below 240 or less 3 of the last 5 years. He's about to turn 30 years old, and he's looking for more money. He's also a guy who strikes out an insane amount of times with 180 or more strikeouts for the last 5 years. The fact that he averages a 5 WAR over 162 games is a very significant difference compared to Carlson, who has only averaged a 2 WAR over his 162 games. But he's, over the last couple years, had 2 of the better years of his career. the two best years of his career in terms of WAR. He's looking for less money, and he's a little bit more versatile defensively. I think that Acuna Jr. is a better hitter. But with the fact that we've already brought on Marcelo Meyer and Bo Bichette this offseason, and we've still got the opportunity to also potentially bring on Ota to help our offense, I think we're kind of at a situation where we just want to add good, solid players to the team. And I'd also prefer to make not as long of a commitment. So now the question is, can we get Carlson for less than he's looking for? He's looking for 4 years at $24.6 million from LA. Can we get him for somewhat less than that and maybe add in some team options to protect ourselves? And I mean, he really is almost a full year younger because he just turned 29 a few months ago. So a year less commitment for a guy who's basically a year younger at this point. I think in the situation we're in, that probably makes sense. All right, Carlson said he's looking for $24.6 million a year over 4 years. We're offering him an average of $24 million a year over 4 years, but we have put a team option into the final season. It's front-loaded with $30 million this year, then 19 each of the 2 years after that, and then a team option at 28 for the final season. So gives us some protection if it doesn't work out. And he's looking for a little more money. So we'll have to see if we can structure something in a way that protects us but also gives him what he wants, because now he's looking for more money with the way that we structured that than he was originally. All right, we've got the average annual value up to $25 million, 30, 20, 20, 30 with a team option for the final year. I think the team option in that final year is the thing that's the hang up for him, which I get. Yeah, he's not willing to accept that team option, it seems like. So we may have to structure this a little bit differently, but it seems like we're going to have to give him 4 years and really be on the hook for all 4 of those years to get him to talk turkey with us. So we're coming back with 4 years, $99 million, so $24.75 million, 30 this upcoming year, and then 23 each of the 3 years after that. No team option in the 4th season. I tend to think he'll think about this offer, and he is willing to think about it. So we've got a 4-year, $99 million offer out to Dylan Carlson. And you can see that definitely limits our flexibility as far as the money at this point if we are to end up signing him. And obviously, we'll need to find out what's going to happen with Carlson. If we do bring him on board, clearly that limits our flexibility, not just this year, but future years. But I do think when I think about our team at this point, we've got too many offensive players at this point, and it is conceivable that we could look to recoup a little bit of minor league talent by potentially moving on from a Eric Pena or a Nick York or a Johnny DeLuca in the outfield, or a Diego Velasquez or a Jordan Westberg among our infielders, to kind of open up the spaces that we need on the major league roster if we do end up also signing Carlson and Ota. So I guess there is a possibility for us to replenish our farm system a little bit if we do bring Carlson on board, and that would also potentially take a little bit of money off of our books, which would hopefully put us in a position where we could potentially add back some of the money that we've recently pulled out of our scouting and player development budgets as well. So we've still got options ahead of us. It's only December 1st, and now we're just in a waiting game to find out what happens with Dylan Carlson, as well as the other guys that we've made offers to. And Dylan Carlson has gotten back to us, says that he likes our offer, but also supposedly is still looking for about $27.5 million over 7 years. So we'll see what happens there. Lang Choi, who was the guy we made a minor league offer to, we're still waiting for a scouting report on him. Sounds like we'd probably have to offer him a deal like the Mariners did. Yankees looking for Eric Pena is a guy that I do like, who just said, though, that we might need to move on from. And they're offering Freynel Nova, who's a reasonably interesting pitching prospect. Started 29 games for them last year, 11-11 with a 4.91 ERA. Could he be a back end of the rotation starter for us? Potentially. Could he be a really interesting arm out of the bullpen? I think definitely. I don't know that I'm ready to pull the trigger on this right now. And I think there's probably guys I'd prefer to give up rather than Pena. But it's good to know that there are potential options out there for those kind of players where we might be able to supplement our bullpen while opening up a spot on the roster for the likes of Carlson. Lang Choi, given our questions about the contact, the home run power in the eye, I don't think there's a need to chase after him at this point. If he's still available in a couple of weeks when we've got a scouting report, I'll think about it. I guess if offer him a minor league deal again, but I'm sure he's not going to take that. And Takao Ota says that he likes the contract we've offered him, the minor league deal with major league options. Adrian Morjan likes our offer too. We're getting close to the start of the winter meetings tomorrow. Still don't have any official signings, but the commentary from Carlson, Morjan, and Ota is generally positive at this point. And we also have finally gotten the scouting reports that we were interested in. Ji-Hoo Kim looks like a potentially respectable major league starter, which is what we thought he was. Minor league contract that becomes a major league contract. As a potential fifth starter for us, I'm willing to bring him into camp with that kind of deal. We'll obviously try to save a little money, $1.2 million, and he's willing to think about that. So we'll see what happens with him. Lang Choi, we're now high scouting accuracy on him. The home run power potentially a little better than we thought it was. We've got that offer out to him to join us in the minors, which he's probably not going to go for. Most importantly, Takao Ota. And we're high accuracy on him, and we still think that there's potential for really good contact and home run power. So we'll wait to hear back from Choi and Kim on those minor league contracts, and then hear whether any of these guys who allegedly favor our offers actually back it up by coming on board and joining us. Lang Choi still doesn't want a minor league deal, so we'll probably just move on from him. Kim, looks like we can get him to camp as maybe a potential fifth starter. Winter meetings are underway. Last year we got real lucky in the lottery, moved up to second overall. Is there any luck for Buffalo this year? Actually, we did move up from 7th to 5th, so could be worse. Got a top 5 pick for a third consecutive season, so hopefully there will be an opportunity for us to add some more talent in the draft next year. It looks like someone got real unlucky. Whoever was supposed to be number 1 is not even in the top 6, so that is a real bummer for whoever that was. It was probably Philadelphia, because they were in our division and they're the only team we beat, and they had a brutal season. So it looks like they got very unlucky in the lottery this year. And now it's just a matter of waiting. Find out what happens with Carlson, Morjan, Kim, and Ota. And maybe we'll get somebody signed before the end of the winter meetings. And Carlson is coming back to us. Says he wants somewhere around $98 million over 4 years. We just offered him $99 million over 4 years. And there were no options involved. Oh, now he's looking for $28 million over 4 years. So clearly looking for more money. At that kind of money, oh, it looks like you probably all saw this before if you were looking closer than I was, but it looks like Acuna Jr. is off the market, unfortunately. He signed with the Rangers. Ooh, not a horrible amount. Ooh, but he did end up getting 6 years at $23.6 million a year. So he is off the market, and now it's a question of do we want to start offering Carlson some even more significant money? I like the bat. It would definitely help our offense. And as we've talked about, and as we remember from previous episodes, our offense was pretty bad. Bottom half of the league in just about every category, except for extra base hits and stolen bases. And I guess walks, we were technically just barely in the top half of the league. Ended up 11th in runs scored, also 11th in runs allowed. Our thought is that bringing guys like Bichette, Meyer, Murphy on board will help our offense a little bit and hopefully also help our defense, which will help our pitchers. Because we haven't focused as much on the pitching staff this offseason yet. Still waiting to hear from the left-handed reliever, Morjan. But Carlson looking for more money. I mean, I do like the bat. It's average, above average, or well above average in all 5 of the batting ratings, and he's decent defensively. He's a good major league player. But I don't know that I want to be giving him $28 million a year, which seems to be getting to the range that it's probably going to have to take to get it done. Could front load things even more and just kind of sacrifice the salary situation this year. Obviously, we're a little front loaded with Ohtani's contract. Painter's contract is going up the next couple of years. Meyer's going to be making big money next year. We could front load things a bit this year. We've got the capacity to do that. I think we'll give it one more try with Carlson. And if we can't get him signed, then maybe we move on. Back to the trade market, perhaps. I do want to make sure that we end up spending a lot of this money that we've got available. But there are other options out there. Could bring in somebody like Salvador Perez as our backup catcher to Murphy, which would give us better defense than we would have with the youngster, and we could still have the young catcher Basallo playing more first base, DH, pinch hit for us at the major league level and still get his bat. Verdugo, as I talked about, I don't love, especially with that disruptive personality. We had Jose Abreu a couple years ago, and only actually just the season before last, our first season in 2026, and we ended up trading him away before the trade deadline just because he wasn't part of our future, so it would be a little odd to bring him back. I think in the free agent market, Carlson is the best option out there, so we're gonna make one more run at him. All right, we've got a proposed deal for Carlson, averaging $27 million a year. So that's significantly up from where we were before. Not to the 28.4 that he's looking for. We're giving him $6 million more this upcoming year, but then only $1 million a year more for the 3 years after that. I don't know whether it's going to be close enough to get where he wants. He says he's willing to think about it, though. 4 years and $108 million, up from 4 years and $99 million, which is where we were before. So Carlson kind of likes our offer. The starting pitcher, Ji-Hoo Kim, says he's got a better deal with Houston. We'll submit $1.4 million with a option, which is a little more than we had offered before. So still waiting to hear back from all these guys. We're also getting close to the Rule 5 draft, which is on December 25th. And we'll cover international amateur free agency in our next episode, but we've ran our camp in December at this point, so we've now run the October, November, and December camps. One camp left to run in the month of January before we need to figure what our strategy is around that class. And I do tend to agree with the assessment some of you have said in the comments. It looks like a year to maybe just take a lot of different shots on goal because there were not any players that really stood out as incredibly interesting. That said, still waiting for enhanced scouting reports on a lot of these guys, and it's possible that someone will be better than we initially thought by the time we get to January. So again, we'll focus on figuring that out in our next episode. And Dylan Carlson continues to play hardball with us. And he now wants over $30 million a year, he claims, for 4 seasons. As much as I'd like to bring him on board, I think it's probably time for us to pivot away from him. I want to keep our financial flexibility and feel, although I have been cycling some veterans through and continue to do that with the likes of Murphy and Bichette this offseason after we brought in Bieber a year ago. The only long-term commitments we have are Ohtani, which was very intentional, and then the 24-year-old Painter. Hopefully we're going to be making a long-term commitment at some point to the 25-year-old Meyer. But I don't feel great about potentially spending $30 million plus a year on Dylan Carlson. So the question is there anyone to pivot to? And the young outfielder Trey Fletcher is a cheap option. He's a guy who still hasn't even played in the major leagues yet. He combined for 25 homers last year between AA and AAA. The contact isn't great, but the gap power, the home run power, and the eye honestly aren't all that different than we had with Dylan Carlson. I'm not claiming that he's a Dylan Carlson because he's not as good a contact hitter and he's not as good at avoiding strikeouts. But he's got more speed. He's not looking for a ton of money. Yeah, he's looking for a minor league contract that becomes a major league deal. We're certainly going to submit an offer for that to him right now. No guarantee that he would even make our team, but we'll see what he's got to say. And we'll also keep thinking about Carlson. I'm going to finish the episode right now. If you've got strong opinions on Carlson and what we should do there, would love to hear them in the comments. Let me know what you're thinking and maybe help me make this decision. I am kind of at the point where it's probably going to take an average of around $30 million a year to get this deal done at this point, and he's obviously a very good offensive player, but he's not a great offensive player, and over $30 million a year is starting to me sound like what you want to be paying to someone who's a great offensive player. That said, I've got the money to spend right now, and if I don't spend it on Carlson, the big question is where it's going to go, because Ota and Fletcher and even Morjan are not big ticket items. Taking a look at the pitchers, we could go crazy bringing on Edwin Diaz. I mean, we've already kind of brought on our closer for the year with the trade that we made for Williams. But clearly, Diaz could be a longer-term answer for us potentially. But that's a lot of money for a guy who's going to be 34 years old before the season starts. Bruzdar Graterol. Don't love that he's fragile, but he is a guy who could potentially start for us or be a really good arm out of the bullpen. I guess between the third pitch being average and the brutal stamina, it's tough to make a case for him as a starter. He could be an opener, but I'm not going to do that. So he's pretty expensive as a reliever for us when we look at the guys who are really listed as starters. Not a ton of high potential guys out there. It's more guys who could be a fourth or fifth starter for us with a Hunter Green or Chris Bassett, Matthew Boyd, Zach Eflin. Don't love any of those options. We could go with Brian Bello, Mr. Average, who again could be a decent, respectable-ish fifth starter for us next year. But I still want to try to spend as much of this money as possible. And even if we don't get Carlson, I do feel like with the fact that we've added Murphy and Meyer, both of whom we're going to be spending more than $13 million on this year, we have at least started to spend some of that big money that we had available. And we also obviously could take another $15 million out of the budget if we just get our scouting and player development back to where they were before. But even if we do that, we've still got $20 million to spend. So I guess my question to you, kind viewer, if you are still watching, should I make one more run at Dylan Carlson, or is it the right decision to kind of move on, see what happens with the likes of the offers we've made to Fletcher, Morjan, and Ota, and potentially keep investigating the trade market as a way to maybe bring on a little bit more salary and spend the money that we have been given for this upcoming season. Obviously, we can look at guys who aren't on the trade block. Zach Gallen looks like the best starting pitcher available. He is someone who's making some big money the next couple of years, so I imagine Arizona would not be looking for a ton for him. Looks like his career is kind of going in a less than positive direction the last few years as he's gotten into his 30s. Is still a two-time All-Star, 25 and 26. Slipped back this year to 10 and 11 with a 4.18 ERA, and his WAR was cut in half. But we could make a run at a player like that. Taking a look at the batters who are available. Byron Buxton, I believe he just signed an extension, I thought I saw. Yeah, he just signed a big extension with Minnesota. Kind of odd that he would be on the trade block after signing that big extension. Obviously, incredibly talented defensively, has some ability to run a little bit and pretty good home run power, but the contact not great, the fragility not great. The fact that he's almost 34 years old, not great. Going to be 34 tomorrow. Brian Reynolds, a respectable-ish bat, guy who's making big money next year. We could probably pick him up for almost nothing, given the amount of money that he's going to make. Not as good as Dylan Carlson, but also don't have to make that long-term commitment. So we've got options out there. Obviously, we can try to make a deal for somebody who's not on the trade block either, and that may be a more fruitful avenue for us to pursue if we decide that we are not going to re-engage with Dylan Carlson. But if you've got thoughts on what we should do on that front, would love to hear them down in the comments. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.